Hi, I'm Jennifer from Positively Learning, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of my students' favorite literacy games. I use this not exactly every day of every school year in my reading intervention groups. So, we're going to be taking a deep dive. I'm going to open the file and share with you how to play the game and how to use this. I'm also going to be sharing differentiation tips. So, I have the game opened here, and then I also have this very fancy slide. And I'm hoping to get at least 10 items on this list to share different ways to differentiate this activity. My background is I'm in special education. I was a teacher, splitting my time between the inclusion classroom setting and pull-out services. So bringing students to the resource room, which was my classroom. Now I'm an instructional coach supporting newer special educators and gen ed teachers who may be co-teaching for the first time. And one of the main areas of concern or sources of stress, to be honest, is differentiation. I'm always asked, how am I going to meet all of the needs in my classroom? So, whether you are teaching a classroom of 25 or 30 or pulling a small group of five, you can potentially have as many levels as you have students. So, even in my small groups, if I had five or six students, that means I could have five or six different levels. Or I could have students working on the same level or skill, but needing completely different things based on their areas of strength or need. So, differentiation is definitely a challenge. It can feel like a superhuman task. Now, please don't withhold judgment, but it's actually the area that I love, and I love to talk about it, and I love to help with. I am the type of teacher who likes to look at an activity and see how many different ways we can use it. Now, it wasn't always like that. Often, of course, I think many teachers can relate to you want to meet your students' needs. So if you have, say, five different needs in this group, you may be prepping five different activities. You find one that's just right for one student and just right for another student. And if you have the time and the energy to get all of those things prepped and put out in front of a student in a timely manner, they use it once and then you're moving on to the next activity. And I don't know about you, but I just could not keep up with that. So, one of my goals and one of the things I love to do is to teach differentiation tips, especially like the idea of using one activity in multiple ways. So, even if you don't teach literacy or you don't have a need for a literacy review game, hopefully some of these differentiation tips will help in another content area in your classroom, ideas that you can put into place right away. So I encourage you to pause this video and get a piece of note-taking paper. So as I go through this list, and I'm going to go through pretty quickly, you can copy down ideas that are going to work just right for you. So we are going to be looking at this blast game, and it is a review game. I should mention that this is a game that should be played in a fast, engaging way at a student's independent level. So this is not a teaching game. It's more of like a reinforcement game. And I'll tell you a little bit more as we go. I chose this game because, again, it was so engaging. It was such a popular game in my classroom. And I will admit, I did sometimes work with students that were just a little bit more reluctant to take risks. And this was a game that they loved. So that made me love it too. You will see in my Positively Learning blog or in my store, you're going to see that I have 22 different blast games. And it's because I had students that were making requests for special themes. 11 of them are like seasonal and holiday, and 11 of them are kind of what I refer to as evergreen themes that could be played any time of year. Do you need 22? No, probably not, but I will share how we balanced them all and how my students enjoyed it. The one that we will be taking a look at today is a emoji theme. And I chose that because it's a little bit more multi-age, a little more universal, and it's something that could be last all year. I also chose the emoji game because this game is included in one of the forever resources in the Word Work Club that I have on my blog. So if you're a member of this club, you already have this game. And the different forever resources, those are resources you have instant access to and you keep on getting access to even though the monthly sets change. The reason I chose this and the other resources is it follows that idea of you can use one activity in multiple ways. All right, so let's take a closer look. I've opened up the file, and every blast game, regardless of the theme, follows the exact same format. In fact, at the end of this video, I will link up to a blog post where I give some more details about playing blast games with your small groups. And there's a link to a free game. And it's a full-size free game. So you get everything that's pictured here. And it is a detective theme, which is nice because you can use that all year. All right, so when you open up the game, the first page serves as a table of contents. And what this game is it's one game that you play, but you can have multiple levels going on. So that's a key piece for differentiation. So on our list, I'm going to start off with just the intended use. It is a literacy game. I think it works best in small groups, the card size, the way the game runs, and how quick it is. You could play it in a larger group. Definitely, the game would still be played the same way, but I just think there'd be like large gaps between people's turns, so it might not be quite as engaging. I used it in small groups, and we used it as warm-ups. Nothing like typing in front of a group, and cool downs. And then whenever we needed to like bring some energy to the group, and it was at an independent level. So talking about the levels and going back to that table of contents, the same game can be played using sight words. And I pulled the first 60 from the Fry words, which has a lot of overlap with like big box curriculum sight words or the Dolch words. There's a lot of words that appear on all of those lists. So you can just pull out the ones that you need. There's also phonics skills. So there's a set of 60 CVC words, those short vowel words, 60 long vowel words with a silent E spelling, and then there's phonics chunks. And chunks are those isolated sound spellings. So for example, the R controlled spelled AR would be a chunk. And so my students, if they got that card when they're playing the game, they would just look at that phonics chunk and produce the sound like R. We always did that like a pirate. I don't teach phonics chunks in isolation. We, of course, apply it to word reading. However, it is in isolation for this game, and it was a big success. My students loved it. I think that because we added like a multi-sensory approach with sound effects, the visual looking at the card, some gestures, that made it really engaging and kind of helped that learning stick. But also, I think it was a huge success because we had reduced that complexity. So, for example, a R-controlled word like shark, the digraph, the initial digraph at the beginning of the word shark, that may be giving my students some trouble. So that focus on the bossy R in the middle kind of lost or just doesn't have that same impact. So we have the phonics chunks in isolation. And then there's a set of alphabet cards. They are the lowercase letters, and I put in some of the common digraphs. So coming back to our list, we talked about this literacy game being at an independent level. You would pick the skill that your student needs, and you can play the game, whether it's sight words, whether it's phonics, or whether it's the alphabet. But what's awesome about this is that all of the game cards are the same size, same format, so you can mix and match. You could mix and match with letters and sight words. You could mix and match with different phonics skills. You could combine sight words and phonics. You can mix and match any way that makes sense for your students. So if you have that group of 5 students and you have multiple levels in that group, you can play the same game and they could all be getting their levels met. I just mentioned that we talked about letters and those chunks, and we talked about words, the sight words and the phonics words they're reading. So you could use these cards for something completely different. You could either play the game or you could just use them as sorting. Sorting between letter versus word. And I should put letters because we do have those chunks in there as well. So that's one skill that we know is very, very important, concepts of print. I would say that we did not use that for this one. Maybe we would warm up real quick to like get our card situated and then play the game with the mix and match skills. But it's an idea that you could use these cards for because they're all the same size, the same format. It makes it easy. All right, I did mention the alphabet. And I do want to mention that they are lowercase letters, but you could use that for letter ID, recognition, naming the letter, or of course you can use it for sounds, whatever your students need. Next thing I want to mention is the aspect of parallel play, not like in necessarily the Piaget way that we learned, but the parallel play is what I think of as when I'm running my resource room and I've got these multiple levels and multiple needs that we're trying to meet at the same time. I don't want my students to be like overly aware that there's the alphabet group in this corner and there's the long vowel sound spelling in this corner. And of course, flexible grouping as students progress, they're moving from group to group. But what could happen is that, okay, you've got that alphabet group in September, and there's quite a few students in there. But as time goes on and our students are making progress, they're starting to move across to the other group. But you know what? Jennifer is still over there in that alphabet group in April, and it's totally fine. That's where she needs to be. But how does Jennifer feel about that? I noticed some students may not be as aware, but many of my students were. And one of the biggest parts that they were aware of is that they were leaving their gen ed classroom to come into the resource room. So they're already a little sensitive to this. This game kind of cuts through that. If you are mixing and matching, you're playing one game with a group of students. But in that game, you could have the alphabet, you could have CVC words. You could have silent E words. You could have the chunks. You could have sight words. You could have whatever your students need while they're playing the game. So Jennifer could be sitting next to Jaden. They're at totally different levels, but they can share that experience. They can still play. Everyone like kind of saves face, and it's really tackling that self-awareness. When my students had developed that self-awareness, which of course is a great skill to have, unfortunately, it also sometimes led to being less willing to take risks for fear of like not measuring up, just that type of self awareness. And we don't want our students to feel that way. These are levels that were dictated to them that may not be appropriate at all. Okay, moving ahead. One other key piece, and kind of goes with that self awareness, is the area of social social emotional growth. There you go. All right, so self um, awareness goes along with that. Many of my students had behavior goals on their IEP, and they had services with the school counselor, social worker, or school psychologist. And when it was appropriate, many times I would see my students meeting in small groups and playing like traditional games that involved turn taking, social skills, and accepting loss. Now, I know that sounds very dramatic for a game, but let me show you what I mean. So we talked a little bit about the table of contents, and now I'm going to talk about how to actually play the game and that loss that our students may experience. This is the emoji theme. So I have game cards that follow the theme. And so if your theme is like winter or Valentine's Day or superheroes, they would coordinate with that theme. But here's the emoji ones. I have a set of cards, and there's 6 of them on a page, lowest prep cut that I could figure out. They say cool on them. And what these are intended to be used for are for extra turn cards. I keep them extremely open-ended in case you want to use them for something else. But this is what I used for extra turn cards. They come 6 to a page. I often printed 2 pages of these, so that just keeps the game super exciting. So as students are playing, they are going to be getting 1 card per turn. So we're just moving in a clockwise direction and they get a card. If it's a text card, which I'll show you in just a moment, they're going to read the card. Awesome. And the turn is over and it's moving to the next player. Pretty fast. These are the extra game cards that make it exciting. So here, if they would draw this card, it would be an extra turn card. Now we have extra turn. So then we also have skip a turn. Now, these are totally at your discretion. You may find that losing a turn, skipping a turn is just not appropriate for your group. I found that most of my students, through like modeling and just being in these like safe community learning communities, they did great with it. They really worked with it. We made it like a learning opportunity, and it was okay. There was one school year we did not use these cards. It was absolutely not appropriate. It wasn't the time to be developing those skills during our reading groups. So we did not use them. You know your students best. So these are the skip a turn cards. Again, very open-ended. They say, talk to you later. You can decide that that means we'll talk to you on your next turn because this turn is skipped. So if a student gets that, whoops, it would just move to the next player. And then I also have a alternate, and it is the poop card. I did put it in there. I did go there. That is up to you. Some groups, this would be wildly inappropriate. Some groups, this would be exactly what they need. Maybe you have students that don't necessarily want to come to the resource room for a game. But this card is like their jam. Like this is what is going to bring that first grader into your room. Completely up to you. You can print a couple of these, a couple of the others, or choose one or the other, or neither. The last one is another option. Some years I used it, some years I didn't. It says LOL, it's very open-ended, and I designated this as a switch card, referring to the direction of the game. So if we're playing the game, we're reading the cards, and I'm the facilitator, so I'm not playing, but I'm passing out the cards. And if this card would come out, it would switch the direction of the game. So if we're moving clockwise, this card comes out, the game starts moving counterclockwise. It was super exciting. My students loved it. You have to kind of gauge how well that's going to go in your classroom. We talked about accepting loss. If your game gets switched right when it's like before your turn, that could be a huge bummer. And we don't necessarily want to be dwelling on that. That is up to you. But there's many opportunities for that social emotional development. One quick note on that with turn taking and that skipping a turn, one thing I did do with a lot of success, and again, I was working with like little students, young students. One thing that we did do is if this card would come out, we'd be like, dun, dun, dun. And I'd be like, wow, Jennifer's handling that so well. Like, let's give her like shine. And what a great job. She's being such a model, being a rock star in this game. Should we give her another turn? What do you think? And everybody would be like, yes, she should. And of course, halfway through the year, I always had like a couple of mother hens in my group that would take this over for me. They'd be like, Miss DeBras, I think she should have another turn. I'm like, oh, what a great idea. Watching out for your teammate. Excellent. Thanks for being a model, everyone. And so that was a great opportunity that kind of lightened the mood a little bit. So those are the different game cards. And then we did talk about the different text cards. Now, this was let me decrease a little bit. These are as low prep as I could get them. 6 cards per sheet with no spaces in between. So when you print it out, you can just quickly cut around the outline and then cut the cards, cutting only the cards that you are going to use. Some themes were just so popular, I knew we were going to use them all the time, especially the universal themes, and I would just prep all of them because like maybe I needed all of those different levels. Some like a holiday theme that I knew I wouldn't be using quite as much, maybe I'm only prepping the CBC words or something, or the sight words. That is going to be completely up to you. Okay, so another thing that you can do with these cards, your students are playing the game, mixed levels, same levels, everywhere in between. You are the facilitator, so you are dealing out the cards, face up, face down, does not matter. It is a fast-paced game, but I should mention it is not a fast answering game. Students are not timed. It is not a race. I compliment students that are taking their time to use their skills. I, will think aloud and model me using my skills as I am identifying a word, reading a word. It is not a fast game in that sense, but it is a fast game because those turns are pretty quick. You're reading one word, moving on, skipping a turn, moving on, switching directions, moving on. So it is very fast. You are facilitating, so you are not playing. So it provides a great opportunity for progress monitoring. For example, if I had a group of 5 or 6 in my small group and we were playing a game, even if we play for only 5 or 6 minutes, you're going to get multiple turns each child. So I would be like keeping an eye on one student and waiting for about 4 or 5 turns. I use 4 or 5 because it is the easy percent. If they have 4 turns and they get 2 out of 4 right, 50%. I can quickly monitor that on a clipboard, on whatever I want. If they have 5 turns, I can do it by increments of 20%. I tend to do that with 1 or 2 students per game. But if I'm playing the game all of the time, by the end of the week, I'm going to be getting every single one of those students in there. So it's a great time for progress monitoring. Now, the reason I like to use activities like this is I feel that it's super authentic. My students love this game. They are engaged. They are a little more willing to take risks. They're having fun. I feel like I'm getting a much better effort participation level in this, and that makes it a much more authentic assessment. If I was just cold, like flashing words at them, and they were just like doing their best or possibly guessing, that's an assessment as well that's giving me more information, but it might not be quite as valid. Here, I feel like I'm really getting a good read on how they're doing. Okay, now moving ahead, of course, we talked about progress monitoring, and these cards could just be used as simple flashcards. I didn't do a whole lot of flashcard activities, although you could. You could play like a fish or something like that, or just flash them and read the word really quick. Often I did use them as a exit strategy. I was in the resource room, so my students were often lining up at the doors so that we could walk and like be dropped off at our gen ed classrooms. Now, if you teach little ones, you already know what I'm going to say. There is no time ever that I would say, everybody line up. That did not happen, because what would happen? They would all stampede through the door towards the door, which is crazy because we've never done that before and that's never been okay, but that tends to be what happens. So I'm the type of teacher that'd be like, if your name has 2 syllables, toe to the door or to your table or wherever. The same thing with these cards. I would like flash a card for them to read. You may go. Line up. Flash a card to read. You may go. So I used them for that too. And so that's just another use out of those games or out of those cards. Next one is, we talked about all those different themes. I tend to use one theme for about 2 or 3 weeks. You can use them much longer, especially the universal themes. But like say I'm starting off with a seasonal theme. I'm using the winter. Like there's a Frozen one. It's really cute. And so my students are reading the words, playing the games, we're having a lot of fun in our small groups. And about maybe the 3rd week, I fade out the winter theme and we bring out the same cards, but they're in a Valentine's Day theme or superheroes theme, or maybe it's all like llamas or something fun. It's a lot of novelty. My students are really excited. They don't, maybe not aware that we're doing the same words or same types of words, but it just adds that like new energy. So I'll take those older cards that we've been using and enjoying and doing a good job with and move them to our word work centers. Now, this is super exciting for my students because they're getting the teacher cards. These are the game cards we've been enjoying and like having an amazing time with. And I think that in my experience, my students always love to use like teacher things. So these would move to word work centers. And what I would do is you could do this in a Ziploc bag. I always used these plastic containers. My students were not like super gentle, and we were working on like OT skills as well as far as opening things. And these are the ones that were durable, colorful, fun, the right size. Also, my students could independently open them and close them. That is huge, right? So I would put about 10 or 12 cards in one of these. So we talked that each deck has like 140 cards. So if you print these out and you use them for the games for a few weeks, and then you move them into centers, you could make many, many individual student centers. So I would put 10 to 12 cards and I would add letter manipulatives. Letter manipulatives could include manipulatives. Letter manipulatives could include like rating your Scrabble game at home using the letter tiles. I love to use those letter beads, not those little square ones, but like the little bit bigger ones that you could string, because that was fine motor for my students and they really enjoyed that. They thought they were so much fun. You can use any type of letter manipulative or letter cards if you wanted, and then making these into individual word work centers. I did make them individual. That doesn't mean your students have to be like working in isolation. I had a huge bin I had gotten so many of these from Michael's or Walmart, wherever they're on sale. And I would just take them out of their carry case and make a bin full of these color activities. So my students knew they could just grab a box, go to their center, whether we're using flexible seating, if they're sitting at the carpet or wherever they want, or they're moving to a table. These are really great to have in a resource room anyway. I would often pull small groups for providing testing accommodations. And when students just need a little bit of a break, I'd say, "Now grab a box and you can move to the carpet and like lay down if you want and like use these cards. There's a crisis. I don't want my students just sitting there providing attention to a student in crisis. So I would be like, get your boxes, go and like attend to whatever we need to attend to. It was a great thing to have. We used them every single day. So those are word work centers. The next type of center you could do would be a sentence center. Same idea, that you could be building centers using the sight words, using the phonics, the alphabet. And then also in this deck, if you scroll all the way to the end, there's whoops, that's too far. How about right here? There's a blank template and it's a blank of the text cards. So you could print these out, laminate them, and use a Sharpie or a dry erase marker to add more words or sounds or letters. What I did though is I would create a center and use the blank template for my students to make their own game. So I would just print out one page of the blank template, make copies. I did not make them in color, but I would give them to my students, and their job was to write the words, cut up, make a game, whether it's the exact same game we've always played that they're really familiar with, or they make a new game like a Go Fish game or a memory game. That is up to them. This was incredibly helpful for some of my students who were needing just a little bit of enrichment. When I pulled my small groups, I always had, like each year, I'd have students that possibly didn't have IEP goals in early literacy. Maybe they were like in their classroom, they were keeping up with their peers. Maybe their pacing, they needed a little bit slightly different pacing. Or maybe they just benefited from a small group setting for other reasons. Like if they had behavior goals that we were also working on and they just thrived being in that smaller group. They maybe were like a little bit of the leader of the smaller group. So this was a great activity for them. I did try it with all of my students at least once a year, often during like spring fever, when like everything was kind of starting to break down a little bit. I often did this activity, but it's a great enrichment tool for like that individual student who needs a little bit more. So he or she would work on this for centers Monday through Thursday, creating the game, writing the words, cutting, like doing all of the things to prep the game. I'd give them a Ziploc to put everything in. And then on Friday, maybe Fun Friday, they would be able to present it to the rest of the group and then they could take it home. That was super fun to do. Good times. All right, one last thing I want to mention before we wrap it up. Number 9, when I talk about the word work centers, please note that you could differentiate within that center by providing more or less cards, also providing more or less letter manipulatives. There are some that I would just use the vowels and throw in a handful of the initial, or I'm sorry, the initial and final consonants. Of course, it would be much more complex if you added all the letter manipulatives. Your students would have to like differentiate and find discriminate between the sounds. But that's a way that you can make those a little bit different level. What I often did on the outside of the box is I just color coded with a sticker. I didn't want to write on these because they're so nice. I did try color coordinating, like all the orange were CVC, all the yellow were sight words. Did not work. Too much. There just weren't enough colors of what I needed, and it was a lot. So what I did is I got different colored dot stickers and I put them on the outside. And so my students would know, like, you can get anything you want, student choice, if it has a yellow, red, or pink sticker. Or maybe you can get anything you want with the blue, or whatever we decided. So that was nice because then we gave them student choice. All right, so very quickly, you might want to take a picture of this. Hopefully you've been jotting them down as you go. The last game is in my store that you can purchase it individually, or it comes in a bundle of all different themes. There's 11 holiday and seasonal, 11 evergreen or like universal themes. And then this emoji theme is included in the Word Work Club. So I'll be sure to link that below as well so you can see what other resources you get instant access to. And be sure to follow along to the blog. You're going to grab a free last game that you can prep and get ready to use in one of these many different ways. All right, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow along because there are many more videos coming along tackling different activities and all the different ways to differentiate them. All right, thanks so much.